Hey, and happy Friday, deities. Hope everyone is having a great day. And surprise, Open Beta 2 went live today, right?
Yeah. Vulcan decided that he wanted to be in the game
Exactly,
now, I guess.
yeah. We got to get the turrets out there. And had a big patch today. Got a lot of known issues. It's not quite on fire, but as Pon would say, it's kind of smoldering right now. So we want to communicate a few things before we get into the nitty-gritty of the patch and kind of recap patch notes with y'all. But earlier today, we had to disable Athena and Geb. Athena is back on, but with her aspect turned off. We have a fix for Geb and are working to get him re-enabled in-game and live. Within the next hour or so is the plan that I heard from Kabir.
Yeah. The bug is if you use your rollout and you hit someone, you just can't do anything after you hit somebody. I don't know how that one slipped through. You could do the jump into knockup and it was fine, but if you ever just accidentally ran into somebody while you were in ball form, he would break. So that's not good, and that's why we had to turn him off temporarily.
Yes.
So he'll
Another
be back soon.
thing that is not so good for all you controller and gamepad players, regardless of PC and console, we do have a known issue with Vulcan not being able to purchase the dual mod to get access to that thumper in your consumable slot. That's something we're working on.
It's inadvertently showing you the consumable grid in the like the item section instead of the mod that you want to buy. So if you're on PC, you can double click or right click the thing in your list of your big list of items to buy it. But if you're using controller or gamepad, you can't. So we are aware of that, and we should be getting that soon.
Yep, and I think the last thing off the top of my head, remind me if I forget anything, but I think there's a known issue with Gilded Arrow, right, Pon?
Yeah, so Gilded Arrow, it'll mark targets, but when you kill them, you actually won't get anything. We figured out what the issue was this morning, and so I don't know if it's going to make it into our next hotfix or the one after that, because we'll probably have multiple rolling out. But that should get fixed at some point, in which we'll let people use Gilded Arrow. It does, all the upgrades still works perfectly fine. It's just that base version doesn't quite work correctly.
Well, the motto here over at Titan Forge is always be patching. Keep an eye on our official social media channels and our Discord. We'll be communicating as soon as things get fixed, and we'll let you know as soon as we have everything in a really good spot. But overall, we're super excited to have OB2 in players' hands a little bit early, right?
Yeah, there were. So obviously, Vulcan is kind of the tentpole thing that you can play with today, and people are really excited about that. But there's just a ton of little improvements. We were talking right before we started with OB1. In order to ship OB1 when we did, it locked like beginning of December, basically. So there have been hundreds of small bug fixes that we didn't write down that we have done since OB1 locked that are in OB2. So there's a lot of little things that you should see working better. Like Travis had a big list of like PC item store stuff that was annoying him yesterday, and he was talking to the UI guys about it, and they were like, "I'm pretty sure all that is fixed." And then they had fixed it a month ago, but it just hadn't gone live because of the way the patches break down. So there should be a lot of stuff that's better in OB2 beyond the stuff that we have listed. And we've got 2 new aspects. We've got Vulcan. We've got just a lot of stuff. And before we decided to push this out today, anybody who's ever worked in the field of software development will tell you do not push an update live on a Friday. Because something will inevitably go wrong and you will end up working all weekend. Before we push this live, we made sure that people were, wanted to and were willing to work through the weekend to address anything that did come up. So we, as Isiah said, always be patching. We will be shipping updates over the weekend as needed to make sure that anything that pops up is addressed.
Sweet. Well, we've got the GOAT PonPon here because the patch went live, and patch notes are live on SMITE2.com. If you haven't had a chance to read through those yet, we did want to take some time and walk through a lot of the balance changes that are in OB2 just because there's a good amount of stuff, right, Pon?
There's a ton of stuff. There's some that affects kind of hybrid characters across the board that I want to bring attention to. There's a lot of god changes. We saw also at the tournament, we just saw a lot of consistent picks, and so we got some nerfs there. Aladdin did get nerfed. I'm sure people are wanting to make sure.
It only took one game in grand finals, right?
Well, this is actually his like 4th nerf to me. Since I locked him, I've nerfed him now 4 times. But yeah, I think this one will do quite a bit along with some other changes we've done.
Cool. Well,
is it harder like from an emotional standpoint to nerf your own god, or is it?
It's more you want to be careful to not over nerf the character, because it's really easy internally for like a character to be really, really good, and we've shipped that character live, and everyone goes, "Oh, but you just deal with him this way," and then all of a sudden he's like really actually weak. And so it's always kind of a, you want to be careful to make sure that you don't overdo it. He had quite a bit more room to go than we thought. So
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny. Like, Cabrakan, when we initially shipped him, was weak in Smite 1, and is once again very weak in Smite 2.
I think he was like, was he the weakest one?
He was the weakest character. Yeah. So that, and there are some kind of known issues where some of his abilities don't trigger items in the way that
some of them should actually be fixed today.
Cool.
There should have been that's one of those like sneaky things that got changed. So there should be some stuff that went live today to help fix that one. We also fixed a few cases with that on other characters. Keep track of which ones are still there. We'll work to fix them.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let me bring up the handy dandy laptop. Dun-dun-dun. And we will go through patch notes here on smite2.com. I'm going to full screen this just to make it look nice and pretty. So Open Beta 2, as we talked about on Wednesday, we've got 4 skins here. I know there some people have been reporting that they've been having issues unlocking the cross-gen skins. That should be fixed, and if you're still not seeing it, just hop over to Smite 1 really quick and log in, then re-log into Smite 2, and those unlocks should trigger for you. Underneath general changes, we talked about the new colorblind settings.
Oh, I will say, sorry, just real quick. The Cyber Geisha Izanami, I believe, is a classic skin, did we say? Or is it, which one?
It's a Divine Legacy skin.
Okay, sorry, there we go. So we should have classic skins coming in the next update.
In OB3.
That you'll be able to get with just Legacy Gems.
Yeah. So we talked about the colorblind changes. We didn't show it off, but we do have the blue and yellow health bars back in OB2.
Yes, I was wrong in the last show. Lino sent me a message right after the show. He's like, hey, I was watching the show, and actually I was able to get the blue and yellow health bars in for OB2.
Yep.
So if you want to set the blue and yellow health bars, you can do that. I believe it. I forget exactly what
Yes,
the
I
option
believe
is called.
it is the HUD colors, and there are different presets that you can choose from.
Yes. So so you should be able to do that today in live right now. And also there was a question yesterday about picking your own color from a color picker. And I talked to Lino about that a little bit, and he said basically, yeah, that's theoretically possible with the way that he set it up. It just would be more work to be able to build in a color picker to where people can do that. So definitely something we can consider for the future and not off the table at all. But just for right now, you can pick from the normal and you can pick from the blue and yellow that you like best.
Yep. Another thing that we didn't talk about, we added dual picks and bans to the custom lobby mode. So if you want to run some dual customs, you're more than welcome to do that now in OB2. We talked about text chat now being in the end of match lobby. So you can spam your GGs. Please be nice in chat. I am reiterating that.
BGs, not BMs.
Yes, your GGs, not BMs, for sure. And we've talked about the zoom in and out functionality on the scroll wheel. And we talked about adding pinning functionality to the God page and the God lobby screen. But let's go ahead and hop right into Conquest changes, Pon.
Yeah.
Let's walk us through it. So let's start with buffs. Purple buff and Fire Giant, kind of two in tandem. So these now provide strength or intelligence depending on which is higher.
Yes, so this is a big change, especially for hybrid characters. Since essentially they have dual scaling, their abilities would get both the benefit, while other characters only got a single bit of the benefit. And for especially map level objectives giving power, we want to make sure that that's something that's a bit more fair across the board, because if you balance it for the hybrid characters, then people who aren't hybrid characters don't feel like they're getting the impact. So it's just a nice change. Makes it so that you feel like what you're building in towards is respected. There's also another change on purple buff, which isn't listed here because, of course, we have a whole bunch of things going on.
Right.
Going really fast. This is actually bugged. It was giving lifesteal at the first rank of it, 5%, which is not supposed to, as well as it was giving that same 5% at the max rank when it was supposed to be giving 10.
Okay.
So if you notice a little bit of difference lifesteal that you've had with purple buff before, that's also why that's been fixed to match the tooltip. So, but this is also, when we get later down the list, when we get to like Aladdin's balance, for example, or we get to Neith's balance, for example, we kept this change in mind as we did that balance change, because when Aladdin got Fire Giant buff, he just skyrocketed.
Oh, yeah.
And so we wanted to make sure that when we did our nerfs to him, we also kept this in mind.
Yeah. All right. Next up with Conquest, from the environment art team, just some slight layout updates. We increased the height and length of some of the islands in the jungle just to block longer lines of sight in other jungle camp areas and jungle paths. So.
Yep.
Jungle updates. This is a big one. The side harpies getting some changes here. Saw those were really contested over the Vegas weekend. They're providing a lot. So we increased the respawn timer. We reduced the base gold reward for both the Elder Camp and the Small Harpies, and we reduced the overall buff camp gold scaling from 3 every 3 minutes to 1.5 every 3 minutes.
Yeah, laning should be a mix of wanting to pressure your opponents, get tower damage, invade the jungle, and it largely kind of became just farm these side camps on cooldown repeatedly. They just took too much of the focus. This should temper them back. They're still really good to go for, but they just won't be as focused as they have been, leading to more different strategies in the laning phase.
Yeah. All right, and then last up for Conquest, the Obsidian Dagger, probably my hypest thing from the Vegas weekend. We saw so many cool plays with the Dagger. Just to change here, the Dagger is now always going to deal 500 damage.
It was getting mitigated by true mitigations, and so now it bypasses that. So if you were at like 490 and it didn't kill you, that might have been because you had mitigations, and it now always works.
Yeah, just making it more consistent. If you're watching your health and the second you hit below 500, you should be able to pop this and get the reset. Joust and Duel, just some slight changes here. We updated some of the tower portraits. We fixed being able to channel the teleport while moving. We added some collision around the blue camp to prevent abilities from getting stuck inside walls. Increased stealth zone grass area to fill the entire pathway right by the lane. The purple camp, we pushed the initial spawn time up to 25 seconds. And adjusted the Lost Night, which is the objective in Joust, various different amounts in Joust and Duel, just because we got feedback from players of both of those modes that it wasn't feeling, quite right to kill.
Yeah, Joust has a lot of like very specific, like especially when you start like really try-harding Joust, like making sure you're pressuring the things at the right time, your ability to kill the objective. It's just all that stuff is really important, so we've just tuned that based off the feedback we've gotten, as well as the fixes, like things like making sure like if you're in stealth grass, you're getting stealth.
Exactly. Yep. Lost Night got a little bit of a nerf, I believe. We decreased the penetration. The Titan, we decreased the physical power, and then the Phoenix got a couple of fixes just to be a little bit more consistent.
Yep.
For Assault, we talked about healer rules on Wednesday. This is broken down in patch notes for those who forgot what the healer rules were in Smite 1. We've got them here back again. I will say that we're going to be monitoring these healer tiers as we add more healer gods to the game, right? Yeah. I believe this is just a tad bit different. I believe in Smite 1, Ra is a tier 2 healer. In Smite 2, he's a tier 1 just because he still has a lot of healing, especially with the aspect, right? Yeah.
The aspect adds an extra wrinkle into all of this.
I know.
So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And then we've updated.
What if we made it so in Assault, you were rolled into a god and an aspect combination, and then you couldn't enable or disable?
I mean, it feels in spirit. I feel like I would want to change it, but also like I'm not the Assault target audience.
Right.
Yeah. I'm also not the Assault main, so I should not be live designing here.
Right. We'll take it back to the team and see what they say. We also,
I don't know if we can do that.
Right. Cuban, for example, like his aspect as well. Like,
that's true. Yeah.
Could affect him. He could maybe bump up to tier 2.
Yeah. That's true. For Assault, we updated the Tower and Titan portraits, and then we also updated the loading screen and God Lobby text to display that this is a random pick mode, so just to be a little bit more clear. We went over our ranked Conquest and matchmaking updates. I'll leave them up on the screen just for those who missed our Wednesday show. You can also head over to twitter.com/innocentrabbit_. He's got a thread that he just posted with a lot more insight into these changes. You can ask him questions. Max is awesome. Always super willing to talk ranked and matchmaking with the community over there on Twitter.
It's also been fun because we have the Discord with our ambassadors, and they'll report like a match that feels wrong, and he'll go into it and he'll like be like, okay, here's what happened. I found the thing. It's just nice having someone to like really go dig into all the stuff and have the time to go dig into all the stuff and find these fixes and be able to implement them and get them out so fast.
Yep. So all these matchmaking changes we'll go through here. We can talk about practice. We showed it off, but I saw people asking about the practice changes, so I'll call them out again. We replaced that Emir bot with a totem dummy just to make it a little bit easier for you to get your damage practice. We also added a scroll option to scroll through different types of god bots that you can choose through. And then we also added protections that you can add to your god bots and then apply settings to the bot. This should now more accurately apply to the god bot directly in your crosshairs. So making practice feel a little bit better.
Yeah, it already has like a lot more features than like anything we've had before.
Oh yeah, it's a million times better than Smite 1 jungle practice. But I will say like The thing that chat asks for the most is a button to add stacks to items. So something that we're aware of. I'm just mentioning it because we're talking about it right now.
Yeah.
Not going to be in for at least a couple patches because we got other stuff we need to get done first. But we are aware of that request.
Cool. All right. Vulcan, of course, released today. We've gone in depth on Vulcan in our Titan Talk this past Sunday. And if you're curious about Vulcan, you can log into live now and check them out.
Yeah.
Lots of cool stuff there.
And just as a reminder, as the new god, you cannot use your god tokens to unlock the newest god. So you'll be able to unlock him with your god token. I'm not sure if it'll be next week or the week after or exactly how that'll work, but very soon.
Yeah.
If you want to play him right now, either pick up one of the Founders Editions or you can buy him for diamonds. And he will be available for god tokens very soon.
Yep. And then Hoonbats, not live now, but releasing the week of February 3rd. We've got all of his information here, and we should be talking about him a little bit later.
That is a very good point. So we said very publicly, we are going to release a god a week.
Yes.
You know, and we released Vulcan early. So because we already released Kabrakan this week. We released Vulcan early because he was supposed to come out next week. We currently are not expecting that we will actually ship a god next week, but we're still at that pace of one god a week.
Yeah.
We're still currently planning that Hoonbots will turn on the week of February 3rd. There's a couple things that we want to polish up and ship out as a hotfix before we actually turn them live. So hopefully that doesn't feel like a broken promise to everybody because we're still hitting that pace. We just decided to turn them on early. So it should be a better thing for players.
Right,
but, if you see people complaining, please try and share the good word of,
Yeah.
we're just trying to get stuff early. We aren't trying to, you know, not ship at the pace we're talking about.
For sure. All right, let me bring back the laptop, and we'll get right into balance. All right, let's talk about items first, Pon. Stampede and Screeching Gargoyle.
I mean, I didn't see a single one of those
I didn't see it at
the
all
tournament,
over the weekend, right?
Yeah,
I actually built both of those this morning, even with nerfs. So
they're very good. They're very strong active items. It was our goal to make these active items that were like really underwhelming be more powerful. So we hit that mark, which is great. It was just too good. So now it is reduced. For Stampede, we're just taking down the physical protections, making the buff duration less so that especially that speed immunity that you get for the full duration is now a lower window of time. And then finally, the attack speed buff. It was something we added because it felt like it kind of matched Sprint, which was as close as analog. But we just don't feel like it was needed. It doesn't really fit with the identity that I'm nearly as much as the movement speed was.
Right,
so taking away that power also made us not... We didn't have to nerf the speed more, for example.
Exactly.
So Stampede nerf there, and then Screeching Gargoyle, we've lowered the cooldown rate, which is just, it's getting a lot of cooldown rate for free, as well as we've decreased the active protection shred from 20% to 10%. So a lot more reasonable, a lot less damage that you'll be able to get on people that use Screeching Gargoyle.
Yeah. All right, next up, Tekko Kage. We're decreasing the passive movement speed, along with Gem of Focus, kind of a 2-and-2 nerf here for both those items.
Move speed continues to be the best stat that nobody regards as the best stat.
Yeah, being able to get to a fight, you could think of this like, imagine if you could show up to a fight consistently 10% sooner than everyone else.
Yeah.
and that's really what like you could get to every farm spot 10% faster. It's like one of those things that just like it is really powerful, even if sometimes it's not felt that way. And so Tekakage here and Gem of Focus taking that down a little bit. It's still part of its identity. You still get a lot of value out of it. It is just a really powerful effect.
Yeah. All right, next up, we've got Soul Gem getting a nerf, just decreasing the int by 10.
Yep, it was also part of like the standard mage build we saw in the tournament. It has a really strong win rate. Just feel like we could take it down a notch. It should still be good, but again, taking it down a notch.
Cool. All right, another item that was highly prioritized in Vegas, Kinsblade going to be seeing a nerf.
Yeah, when we added the component to shred off the difference in health, we kept the other part of it high because we wanted to just make sure we weren't over nerfing or changing it too much. We feel like we can easily take away from the base strength of it and really keep it as an anti-high health shred item. And the wording change here is just specific so that there's some people who are confused. Like, I'm at 5,000 health and this person I'm hitting is at 2,000. That's a 3,000 difference. I should be hitting them harder. It's supposed to only be for people with higher health. So that's why we made the wording change.
All right, the World Stone up next as we start talking about item buffs. Lots of buffs here for the World Stone.
Yeah, so World Stone, the big thing is we gave it a lot more mana, we gave it a lot more regen, and we made the passive part of it, the reduced cooldown ultimate, a lot stronger.
Yeah.
But we took away the cooldown rate. And we marked this as a buff, even though it might kind of look like a shift. And the reason is that cooldown rate was actually anti-synergistic with its passive. The way that they stack together doesn't actually work out in your favor.
Okay.
Because you'll reduce one and then you're reducing from that reduced amount. And we really wanted to pin the World Stone as this item that you could buy as like, I've actually gotten a whole bunch of power and I just want my raw snipes up more consistently, but I haven't built CDR to make it super low cooldown. I can build this to actually get a lot of that cooldown value.
Yeah.
This just gives it more of an identity. It doesn't feel like it just kind of you throw it in with all your other CDR items. You actually have to think about where you want it a little bit more. And we think this is just a cool place for it to be.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of cooldown, Chronos Pendant going to be getting a buff here, just increasing the int.
Yep, we saw a lot of cooldown items. You just kind of splashed 15% and got largely what you needed. And Chronos Pendant just wasn't in that list. Yeah. And so we just want to make sure Chronos Pendant really is that defining CDR item.
Cool. All right. Next up is Bloodbound Book, decreasing the cost and increasing the int.
This is supposed to be like the Bloodforge kind of analog for mages, and it just wasn't nearly as good as the Bloodforge was for carries and for assassins. So lower cost, higher int should help it go a long way.
Cool. All right. Dagger of Frenzy getting a buff here, increasing the strength and increasing the active damage per level from 2 to 3.
This is an active that we tried to make stronger with the Stampede and Screeching Gargoyle pass, and it just didn't really hit the mark there. So increasing the base strength just feels stronger on its own, and then that per level, that's going to count to 20 more damage at max level. This should really help it so when you pop the active effect, you feel really strong.
Yep. Hide of the Nemean Lion up next, getting a buff.
This is a big one.
I know, right? So we're adjusting the damage reflect to be pre-mitigation instead of post-mitigation. Explain this to us, Pon.
So Hide of the Nemean Lion was, I want to say it was like the worst performing tier 3 in the entire game, which means it was like on that cusp of like it was on the bottom end. And that's largely just because even when you built it and you used it to like try and counter a carry who was really, really strong, it just didn't really do the job it needed to. And partially because you're trying to deal with that carry, you're building a lot of protections, and then this effect gets weaker and weaker for building more protections. So this just makes it so that as you're building more protections, you're not hampering High of the Nemean Lion. People hitting you are going to have to be a lot more respectful of the fact that you have it. And we discussed, do we want to preemptively potentially nerf it a little bit? But we wanted to see just where this item fell because it had so much room to go up before we were like, well, it really needs a nerf.
Yeah.
And so we think that we're going to try this first, and if we need to, we can really quickly lower it. We can tone back that percentage back.
All right. Avenging Blade up next, going to be getting a buff, just decreasing the cost a little bit for the junglers.
Yep. The passive we thought was going to be a lot stronger than I think we anticipated. And as we've seen, it just does. It's good while you're fighting someone in the jungle, but that is just too niche to rely on, and it was getting a lot of stat penalty because of that. So rather than increasing its stats, we just lower the cost so it's more easily accessible to build in your build. Getting a nice 60 strength and 200 health, I believe, is the stats on it. It's just going to be really good for this cost now.
Yeah. All right, we're moving on to starter items now, a couple of them. Let's talk about Warrior's Axe and Sundering Axe first. So we're going to be decreasing the passive cooldown on both of the versions.
Yeah, so this whole pass is also really focused on just the starters we really didn't see. We actually saw quite a bit of variety on starters. We also see quite a bit of variety on starters that people are building in games. These ones just have fallen off. Warrior's Axe has largely fallen off to things like Death's Toll or for Bluestone Pendant mainly. So this decreased passive means that you can actually leverage that early game lead of being able to like really play around this 8-second cooldown. If you're able to do this really well, you can get really good trades in lane now. So we're going to see how this goes to help Warrior's Axe feel more competitive. And then obviously for War Flag, which is the next one, it had 10 stacks before, which is kind of an awkward number to reach in lane, especially if you're really quickly clearing the lane. You might not actually get a chance to actually really stack this. So we lowered the stack count so that you actually get basically off a full wave clear, you get the full effect.
Cool.
And then and with these number changes, it largely is I think the only case where this was a slight nerf was like the max stack count on the War Banner, which ended up being like 39%. Basically, it's supposed to be either identical or stronger than it was before. So easier to stack to get to its strength, and these buffs are going to be a little bit more effective.
And for anyone who's not tried it, this is one of the best items in Arena.
Oh yeah, in Arena this is great.
In Arena, if your team doesn't have a War Flag, you're probably going to lose.
It's so good.
Yeah,
build a War Flag.
It's like 5,000. Like if I buy it as my only thing and I'm not a healer, it's like 5,000, 6,000 healing by the end of the game.
It's crazy.
That's nuts.
And the move speed for basically like your entire team always on is insane.
Yeah, it's like 20%
so good
movement speed, 40% attack speed. It's
great.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Build this in Arena.
Yes.
All right, Eros' bow up next, one of the newer items in Smite 2, so decreasing the active cooldown from 10 seconds to 1 second. New effect.
Wait, that's not a typo?
No.
No.
That's
Okay.
Yeah, the mark is now indefinite until a new mark is selected or the marked ally is further than 26.4 meters away. Pon,
Yes.
talk to us about this because it can look scary at first.
Yeah, so previously it was kind of meant to be this like more of a mini game where you buff someone for 10 seconds, that falls off, and you have to find a new target to buff, or you have to go actively to choose to buff someone up again. And we thought this was kind of like, one, it made it so people could play around it more effectively, but two, we thought it was going to be kind of a limiter on how strong it could be. But it actually wasn't even that strong even when you had that like kind of restriction on it. And we think that it can actually work really well as no, I'm just going to select you, and you are now my mark, and you're going to benefit from me until you get out of range of me.
Yeah.
And the 1 second is just a small little limiter to make sure that like, okay, I buffed you, I don't accidentally recast this, and I can just immediately buff someone else, or buff someone else, buff someone else. We just want to make that so this is a lot more flexible on who you want to buff, and now you just need to stay close to them.
Yeah.
This number might look weird, but we chose it because it's 3 times basic attack range.
Okay, nice.
So that's roughly what you can use to gauge how far away someone is.
How does that compare to Afro Kiss? Because it kind of feels more like Afro Kiss now, where it's like I link onto somebody, and then once they are out of range, it breaks.
I think Afro Kiss max range, I think it starts decaying at like 1.8, 1.7 basic attack range, and falls, it like immediately ends at 2.
Okay. So much larger than Afro Kiss.
And that's just because like Afro Kiss has a lot of visual extras, and Aerospo just doesn't have that same level of like visual tell. And so this lets you have that flexibility. I believe you also got a mark on you when you have someone buffed with Aerospo. So like Aerospo, so if you lose that buff, you know that person went out of range.
All right. Shifter Shield getting a shift. How fitting. Now grants either 40 strength or 55 up from 40 intelligence, depending on which stat is higher. So kind of like the purple buff fire giant change.
And this showcases kind of why we wanted to do this change. 40 int for like an actual int user was just not good.
Yeah.
40 strength was actually pretty good for a strength user, but for a pure int user, like this item just really wasn't on your radar. And the reason it had to be 40 was because if we actually let it give you enough int to be fully built, you would just build out every hybrid character ever in existence.
Sure.
And we even saw like that was starting to become the case. So now you pick whichever one's higher. Now we can tune it so that it feels good for pure strength users and pure int users. And then we don't have to like temper it because hybrid characters could potentially abuse it too much. We make dedicated hybrid items. They often are off, like we know that those stats, like when you build those items on those characters, they're tuned such that they're really good for hybrid characters. We want to make sure that not all items become this way, and that people who want to focus on pure strength or pure int also have their build variety too.
All right, and then last up, 4 items. Bumba's Golden Dagger is a description update. We changed AoE mention from non-minion to jungle monsters.
Yes. This was to make it more clear about where you'd get this effect from. It was already working this way. This is just a text update.
Cool. All right, well, let's move right along to all the god changes, and let's talk about Uller and Medusa first, because we saw a lot. Well, I guess Jingwei is right here too, but these were the 3 hunters that were super prioritized at Vegas. I believe these were the only 3 hunters that were picked at Vegas, if I'm remembering correctly.
They were definitely, if
but
not,
they were the top 3 for sure.
For sure.
So all of them seeing nerfs. Let's talk about Uller first. So Invigorate, Exposed Weakness. We're going to be decreasing the movement speed. Hail of Arrows, Glory Bound, increasing the cooldown, and then Wield Bow / Wield Axes, we're going to be decreasing the strength that you get.
Yeah, Uller and Medusa, I think both have some things in common, which is they are very excellent. They're just really good at having high kill potential pretty early on. Uller is more focused because that's kind of more his focus. That's like his whole like skill expression. He's getting more focused things to tone down a lot of late game power that he had. So like, for example, the movement speed from Invigorate, right? We saw multiple times just how quickly he could chase down people with his leap and his movement speed. People were burning like blinks to get away, and they're burning stampedes to get away. And he's like, no, I'm still chasing you.
I'm still on you.
As we talked about, movement speed's really good. So toning that down, toning down the cooldown on, or toning up the cooldown on Hail of Arrows, and the strength that he's getting from Wield Bow. These are all things that are going to temper that late game potential and temper how fast and how often he can do his combos, and how quickly he can catch up to someone. And we think this is a pretty good place for him to be, because Uller is one of those characters that's very sensitive to balance. It's really easy to take a character that has this much skill expression, and you tone down some base damage numbers too much, and he becomes basically completely falls off a cliff. So we think these are pretty good places for us to start on nerfs to Uller. And then for Medusa, it's a lot more cut and dry. She has that late game. We feel like that's pretty good. But that early game kill potential she had with Viper Shot was just insane. we saw people like immediately have to burn all the defensive to try and survive it. And this nerf actually takes quite a bit of base damage off of it, as well as makes it so that you don't have that 60% attack speed stim right out the gate. You have to ramp up to it, which I believe matches actually Smite 1 kind of parity of the balance for it. So it's a place that we've been before with Medusa. Right. So this should lower her early kill potential, and then she'll be able to be kind of that standard hunter carry that you can take it to the late game.
For sure. All right, and then last up, we've got a nerf for Jingwei. You're welcome, Bobby. Persistent Gust, going to be decreasing the damage and increasing the cooldown on
Yeah, and we talked about doing potentially more nerfs for Jingwei, but one thing that we wanted to be careful of is the fact that we did do that whole side jungle change. One of Jingwei's strengths was because she can get back to lane so reliably and so quickly, she was actually really good at controlling those. And so because we are making those less valuable, we think Jingwei would kind of naturally fall off a little bit. So we tempered our nerfs because of that.
Yeah. All right, moving right along. Thanatos, Aspect of Reaping. Aspect Thanatos was super prioritized over the Vegas weekend. So changing this with a nerf Soul Reap, we've decreased the bonus damage scaling from 5% max health to 3.5, and then decreased the bonus heal scaling from 1% max health down to 0.75.
Yeah, this was one where we saw every Thanatos was going the Aspect, regardless of what they were doing and what their role was, because it was just that good.
Yeah.
Which just meant that it was overtuned, and so taking away some of that scaling is just going to bring him more into line. If you want to play this, it's still going to be really, really good, obviously, but we want to make sure that the standard Thanatos also has relatively comparable rates, especially when you're playing, like, when your goal is to be very aggressive and very bursty. Base Thanatos should win there, where this Aspect Thanatos is a lot more bruisery with sustained damage from the 3, and he was actually outbursting Burst Thanatos. Wow. Yeah. So, especially once you got enough health. So this should just temper that.
All right. Hecate up next. One of the most prioritized mids from Vegas weekend. So Triplicate Form going to be seeing a nerf, decreasing the bonus damage. And then Spell Eater, we decrease the damage scaling and increase the cooldown.
Yep. So for Spell Eater, it's just less damage, less frequent. That's going to make so she doesn't have so much extreme poke pressure. But Triplicate Form, that mark that she applied, that was doing a ton of work. And it's one of those things that, like, you might not directly feel, but, like, that could really quickly stack up to a lot of hits on you. And so taking away even a little bit of scaling from this, a little bit of base damage, means that that free damage she was getting from this mark is just being toned down. So this should go quite a ways to make sure that Hecate is still good, but not as good as we saw at the tournament.
There was also another known issue with Hecate in the last patch, which I'm not sure if we actually got fixed for this patch or not, where her AO2 was not actually using any mana.
I fixed that this morning.
Okay, so maybe it made it or maybe it didn't.
It's not in now, but we'll make it into a hot fix because it's on our issue stock is high.
Okay.
So I did fix it.
All right, Pon, sorry, I know it hurts, but we got to talk Aladdin nerfs. All right, walk us through what's going on with
I do like there's that one thread where someone was like, man, they even said they told Pon to nerf it and he just didn't.
Right?
I nerfed him 3 times before he went live. It wasn't like I didn't do anything.
Oh, man.
But yeah, no, he's really good. Hybrid scaling at very high values means that he got a lot of value in just his build variety. He had a really high amount of burst. And then, as we talked about, the Fire Giant and Purple Buff, like, if you gave those to Aladdin, he would absolutely just suddenly take off.
Yeah.
And so our nerf here, you might look at it and go, we could go even further. But we wanted to make sure that we were keeping in mind that Fire Giant change and that Purple Buff change, because that is going to impact him quite heavily. And so the big thing you can take from this is, dash damage, lost scaling. Punch damage, lost scaling and base. Agile Run, lost scaling. The Genie damage, lost scaling. Probably the biggest one here, so just all across the board damage. Like, we're taking this, like, if you leap onto someone, you're doing something like 20 to 25% less scaling of each type and some base damage nerfs, which is really significant. That's a really big nerf for our characters. Agile Run, decrease the max leap range from 10.4 to 8.8. So 8.8 is basic attack range. So this is now means that he's going to have less ground that he covers when he actually leaps off a wall with Agile Run. There's going to be less walls that he can just completely jump over as well. Less angles he'll be able to freely jump over. So this should make him a lot more catchable. And then Into the Lamp, we made it so I really needed, I tried to find a better word for this, but non-combatant and combatant was the best, cleanest way I could describe it. But basically, people coming into the lamp to fight Aladdin and the person that he's fighting, they would take increased damage from Aladdin. And that made it so people started to have the play pattern of, actually, I don't know if I want to go help my ally because I might just be feeding Aladdin. And so taking this down means that you have a lot more freedom to hop in there and you should feel a lot more successful in fighting Aladdin. What's not listed here is we also found an issue where it was supposed to be you deal 25% less damage to Aladdin as well. That was actually 40%.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's now fixed to 25%. So you also should be able to actually threaten Aladdin a lot more directly in this patch as well. There should be more counterplay to the ult now. His like major huge burst is getting like this combo of leaping onto someone and dashing through them, punching them. That's getting a pretty significant scaling nerf and base damage nerf, and he should be less evasive. And we've also changed the like shifter shield plus fire giant plus purple buff to not give him double scaling. I think this will put him in a much better spot, and then we'll see if we still have more room to go. And we'll address that really quickly.
We'll definitely be keeping an eye out for the Sultan. Moving right along, let's talk about a couple of healer gods. Aphrodite up first, getting a nerf 2 kiss.
So Aphrodite, we're seeing her do pretty well, but her support especially is something that can be oppressive at times that we're seeing. And so this is really focused around that. So the person that you're linked to will get less movement speed and you'll get less movement speed, as well as you'll share less of your protections with that target. It should kind of temper that Aphrodite support without affecting like the kind of more mage Afro, and just make sure that she's still pretty healthy, but we've targeted the right thing.
Right.
And then we've even also, this is not a confirmation that we are going to do anything, but she would be a prime candidate for an aspect that really does let her focus on being a support or a mage.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the, like, as we brainstorm aspects, that's like one of the things I'm most excited about is we've had characters that have been like, like some people want to play Afro support and some people want to play Afro mid and they get frustrated that like we have to balance somewhere in the middle. So if people like that, we can definitely start discussing that. But that's like the thing that gets me most hyped about our aspect system is
it's
a way to solve characters like Aphrodite who've perpetually had this balance problem.
Cool. All right. Next up, Ra getting a shift to Divine Light. So we're going to be decreasing the solar ray damage, but base damage, but increasing the damage scaling.
Yeah. So this is a pretty direct nerf to tank Ra. Tank solo lane Ra. The base damage is going to be a lot less impactful, especially early as you're trying to clear waves and box other players. But if you're playing mid Ra, you should notice that the scaling is going to help you out a lot and help this ability feel a lot higher damage. So our goal here really was to target nerf specifically that kind of shield solo lane Ra, but make the mid Ra not feel like it got caught in the crossfire. Yeah.
All right. Speaking of another OG god, our boy Poseidon hasn't been doing too hot. So he was really good when he released. He got some really potent nerfs.
Yes.
So we're going to be reverting a couple of those. So Tidal Surge is getting a revert to a previous nerf. Whirlpool as well. And then Release the Kraken going to be getting a partial revert.
When he released, he had really good damage numbers, as well as he had cooldowns that were too low. They were lower than we wanted internally. So we fixed that while also nerfing him because he was being he was really oppressive at the time, and that has kind of floored him to be a lot lower than the rest of the mages. So reverting some of those things that we've done in the past just to make sure he comes back to being with the other mages.
So he still has longer cooldowns, but will deal more damage when those cooldowns are up.
Yes.
All right, Bacchus up next. Belly Flop going to be getting a revert with a buff decreasing the cooldown, and then Belch of the Gods also getting a partial revert, decreasing the cooldown.
Yeah, this is another character we feel like we've just over nerfed as we've done balance on various characters. He was really oppressive at one point. And so we're partially reverting those things to help him come back. He was another character we didn't see much of, and we've seen him kind of fall off on the stats. So this should help him out quite a bit. Yeah.
All right, Soul is up next with a good amount of changes here. So buff overall, Radiance increasing the damage, decreasing the cooldown. Stellar Burst fixing a couple of issues with the description and an issue where the ability would consume poly when thrown. And then Supernova, we've reduced the subsequent hit reduction from 70% to 35%, then 70% for further subsequent hits.
Yes. So stop me if you've heard this before. Character underperforming.
Yep.
We make number bigger, and character should be better now.
Yes.
Really, what we want to focus on though was Radiance. We wanted that damage to be a bit more impactful. You get lower cooldown, just should help you out. The fix for Stellar Burst, especially the Polynomical one, that's an item that you often want to build on Soul, but because if you activate your 2, it would give you the poly proc. You throw the 2, and it actually get rid of that buff without actually giving it. So now when you throw that 2 out, it won't actually apply the Polynomicon, but it won't remove that buff. So the next auto attack you throw will be able to apply it, which should help just build variety on an item that she probably wants anyway. And then Supernova, just make sure that like when you actually land a really good Supernova on someone, you get them stuck in it. It was doing full and then very little damage, and now you have like a middle hit that's gonna hit quite a bit harder, so that you feel rewarded for when you actually get someone stuck in like multiple hits.
All right, moving right along. Neath up next. Getting some buffs. Spirit Arrow increasing the damage scaling, and Unravel increasing the base damage.
Yep. She's another character that's underperforming, and she's also a character that's going to be pretty drastically hit by the things like Fire Giant, Purple buff, especially as someone who plays generally sometimes in the carry role. Having access to the purple buff and then this not affecting her as much. We want to give some buffs to offset that. But she was also just underperforming in general. So backflip, she now has the slow that she used to have is now back. We've tuned it to be a little bit less in duration because we've done that with a lot of our CCs as we bring them over to SMITE 2. We've lowered the duration. But this should give her a lot extra peel that she needs to stay alive. She can backflip and start to chase someone or like land her autos because they're slow now. Just should help her out a lot.
Yeah. All right, Donzaburo.
Chat's like, backflip didn't slow.
I know, right? Yeah. Donzaburo, this is a big one because we fixed a pretty big issue with his passive Dishonest Duplication. So we fixed an issue where Donza clones weren't gaining any stats from Donza when dealing basic attack damage. So after fixing that, we had to do a pass on the passive. So deals now 10 plus 1 per level damage. With the without the aspect, you get 10% basic attack damage. With the aspect, you get 12.5 all the way up to 17.5 basic attack damage.
So it was 40% basic attack damage before, and it was 50 to 70 on the talent, if I remember correctly. So that it wasn't working though. So these are the numbers we think should be roughly equivalent to where we were at before, if not a little bit stronger. So just to show you how big of a difference actually having it work correctly and actually inheriting the stats it should, our goal really is, though, that this should feel about the same as early game, but should scale better in the late game and be a little bit stronger than it was before. Because our goal was to buff Donzaburo when we initially started looking at this, and we found this issue. So that should just make it so that the whole build path feels a lot better. Alluring Spirits, we've decreased the cooldown there. This is going to be both good for standard Donza and Aspect Donza, more frequent taunting or more frequent clones. And then finally, Tanuki Trickery. We also had an issue with this one where it was only using rank 1 scaling. So you were only ever getting the 10 damage as you were the leaf and you fired the auto attack. That attack should do more damage. So not only is it going to be working so it gets the scaling amount, but we've also buffed that scaling amount because we think that he was a character that was pretty low on our sheet. So we want to make sure that we gave him quite a significant bump here.
Yeah. All right.
So lots of fixes. He should just feel better in general as you're playing him.
All right. Kabrakan up next. Wasn't doing so hot, so getting a series of buffs here. So Shadow Zone, increasing the damage mitigation, Refraction Shield, increasing the damage, and then Seismic Crush, increasing the damage as well.
So you remember when I talked about, like, sometimes internally, you don't want to over-nerf things.
I heard Kabrakan was real good internally for a while.
Yeah, so Kabrakan was really, really good internally. Ro made a lot of really good adjustments to bring him down based off our feedback, but we probably did overdo it. We probably gave him too much negative feedback on it. I don't think we needed to go as far. He ended up releasing, he's actually quite weak on his release. So giving that extra mitigation doesn't look like a lot, but again, this is a perpetual effect. Think about the times that you live with 50 health, 40 health. That's Shadow Zone now is contributing to that. And then, his Refraction Shield, that applies to also his Enhanced Refraction Shield. So he's getting double the buff there. So as he uses both of his 2s, he's going to get that increased base damage. And then, Seismic Crush also getting that increased base damage. Should just feel really good, especially if you're going that kind of bruiser tank side. Because we didn't adjust any scaling here.
Right.
But the tank or bruiser side of him should feel really good with these damage changes.
And then you mentioned earlier that we also fixed a lot of his abilities not triggering item effects.
Yes. So he was another character, whereas one is kind of an ability, but it's also an auto attack, and so it has often special rules associated with it. It wasn't triggering a lot of the things. We have fixed, I believe, some of those things. There may still be some on the list to fix, but we have definitely made improvements there. I don't have the full list, unfortunately. If I had the detailed list, I would go over it, but that should also feel better for Kabrakan players.
Yeah. All right, moving right along. Susano, falling out of the meta a little bit in SMITE 2, so he's going to be getting some buffs. Stormkata increasing the damage, Typhoon increasing the damage as well.
Yep, he is another. Him and Nemesis were junglers that we saw underperforming. Nemesis, I think, got a little bit of play at the tournament, but we saw Susano. I don't think we saw Susano at all.
Yeah.
And we just see them underperforming overall. We just think that their damage and their clear isn't quite competitive with the rest of the cast. That's our goal here. So that extra base damage, extra scaling, and decreased cooldown should make Stormkata feel better. It also helps solve a long time kind of trap that Susano has had. This is more pronounced in SMITE 1. SMITE 2 kind of tempered this already a little bit, but you actually want to start with your 3 when you're jungling because you then teleport to it and it gets a 10 it's only a 10-second cooldown.
Yeah.
So like if you actually start with Stormcloud, which feels like the natural thing to start, you're actually really heavily slowing your clear speed as Susano. It's now actually, I believe in Smite 2, these are comparable now. So you actually should be able to start Stormcloud, which should also feel really
nice.
good
Yeah, that's cool.
for Susano players. And then Typhoon, we just over nerfed it. We think that it can get a little bit more scaling and decrease cooldown to be more of that team fight ult.
All right, and then last up for God Balance, Nemesis, as you alluded to earlier, just a jungler that wasn't performing super well, so going to be getting a buff to Swift Vengeance, decreasing the cooldown, and then Slice and Dice, going to be increasing the damage from both the regular ability and the center damage.
Yep, should help with clear speed, should help with pressure, and should help with just roaming around the map and being more offensive. She might get further hot fixes, actually, depending on how some of the changes we're testing internally go. One thing that I think is live is we did a timing pass on her autos, so those should feel a bit more accurate
awesome.
now. And then we are also currently looking into some complaints people have had that when you dash and try to auto, so you're doing the in-hand right after your dash, people have felt that doesn't quite feel as snappy and responsive. We found out why, but the fix is a little bit... we have to just make sure that the fix isn't going to break other things before we ship it live, but expect that coming because we know that that's a thing, and we've identified where that lives.
Cool. Well, woo. That was a lot of balance that we went through. It seems crazy, but OV2 had a lot of cool stuff in it. With Vulcan, we didn't even talk about... Well, we talked about the aspects for... Ares and Sobek on our Wednesday show, but Vulcan also has an aspect that you can mess around with in live. There are a lot of bug fixes on the patch notes on smite2.com. Not going to go through all of them just because we wanted to save just a little bit of time for questions towards the end of the show here. But again, Open Beta 2 live now on Smite 2 if you want to hop in and try out all the cool stuff and try out all the balance changes we just went through.
And actually, I'm looking at the first one there. That probably should have been on the balance changes, so I'll go over it really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Loki had some in-hand canceling rules that were not quite respected well. We made a pass to specifically make it so that you should be able to do things like 3 instant cancel and get your auto attack in-hand reset the way that you want it to, the way that you used to in Smite 1. That should also just help Loki feel better.
Yeah.
It does affect his balance, so I want to just call out there.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Well, we got about 15 minutes left in the show. Let's open up the floor for questions. Chat, have you been playing Open Beta 2? What do you want to talk about today?
Yeah.
I played a couple games this morning.
There you go. You get some wins.
We
don't talk about that.
A little bit of win, a little bit of losing. There was one arena game that was just a complete stop where the other team did not let us have fun. But the other games were pretty good. So
let's see.
Where did Killgoon get that shirt? I'd like one. This is like a at least 6-year-old Target sweatshirt. So if you want to time travel to 6 years ago at Target.
Someone mentioned do you plan on getting rid of the Bruiser jungle meta? So I assume that's mostly talking about that Stampede, Screeching. We pretty directly nerfed those two. I think they're still going to be good items, but I think there's going to be less desire for teams to run 2 to 3 copies of them.
Yeah. Are optimization improvements being done in each patch, or are those expected for the full release?
Yeah, I think every patch we're trying to make improvements. Some you will see more, some you might not see any. It just is kind of like how much time is on the schedule and how productive is the optimization work that we're pursuing, right? Because sometimes, it's incredibly hard to forecast how long something will actually take to do when it's speculative work like improve the performance. It's like, okay, well, we know what's causing performance slowdowns in certain areas. Now we need to figure out how to fix that. And sometimes in a day, our brilliant programmers can knock off 5 things that are hurting the performance. Sometimes a thing will take 5 days to get through, right? Yeah. So, but we are aware that performance needs to be a continued point of focus. I think the biggest issue that we need to circle back to is if you get stutters, especially in your
shader
first
cache.
game of the day, that's caused by shader caching.
Yeah.
And we are pre-caching some shaders at the start of the game, but we're not pre-caching all of the shaders, which is why you get those stutters. So that's something that we know we just need to fix. And I think that will fix a lot of the little hitches that you guys are feeling. That isn't even really just the overall performance. It's just shaders that are caching in real time.
Yeah, and there's also the amount of hardware configurations we have to keep track of and support, and their different cases. I know someone was talking about how like a 1060 might perform better than a 1080 right now because of some floating point stuff that happens. There's a lot of different, like when I on my home computer, I ended up actually cracking 300 for the first time ever, which is really cool. But I also know some people have other problems that like they're having lower performance than I am. So like it's a very complicated thing. Our team's constantly looking at it, constantly make improvements. It's probably going to be a forever process to be honest, but like we're looking at the biggest things that we can do that have the highest impact at basically all the time.
Cool. Yeah, there's a question on is DLSS 4 supported? I don't think that the actual API is out for that yet because they just announced it like last week. So we don't have DLSS 4 yet, but I assume that we will have it before too long when it's more widely available.
And I think also when it is widely available,
you need
I think
the new cards, right?
Well, you don't need the new. You need I think it's 40 still supports it. Maybe 30 still supports it. But like I think Nvidia's app will let you also force it on.
Oh wow, okay.
I've heard that. So yeah, there's a lot to be discovered there still.
All right, this one is probably a little bit more for you, Pon, but do you have plans to lower time to kill and make things more lethal early to mid-game? Is that something that we're looking into?
I think we're generally pretty happy with time to kill overall. Early game feels like you have good kill potential. Mid game feels like you have good kill potential. And if you stop kills from happening, it can really quickly cause the game to stall. So we just want to make sure that we're not making the game too slow at any point. So if we had to err on one side of like time to kill is too fast versus too slow, we'd rather it be a little too fast. Yeah. But we're pretty happy with it. I think the only part we're currently looking at is I think there's a point when people start to get to max build where tanks especially, like if you're being a dedicated tank, you feel like you can't really actually counter build some characters and you feel like you still just die too quickly. So we're looking at that, but we have to approach that very cautiously because again, it's all too easy to go too far in one direction and suddenly the brews are just running at the mages and hunters and they're unstoppable and they stop the game because everyone has to play super safe. So
it's a delicate balance for sure.
I think we're pretty happy where things are right now. We still have a few things we want to focus on, but I don't expect any major, like there's not like a huge desire for us to change time to kill pretty drastically right now.
HDR on Xbox released this patch. Yes, I forgot to mention that.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's a good
yes,
point.
we did get HDR in for Xbox, so that is an improvement, something that people have been asking for. Thanks to Dale for making that happen. There's also the ongoing question about 120 FPS. And I talked to the programmers about this. 120 frames per second on console.
Yeah.
The issue. So I'm trying not to get too technical on this. There's effectively two main threads that are running as part of a UE5 game. There's the graphics thread, which is like the things that you're seeing on screen, and the game thread, which is everything else that is happening to make the game work. Currently, the way that our game thread is going and the processing power of the consoles, because the consoles weigh much more towards graphics power than processing power, they cannot run our game thread at 120 frames per second. So we need to do more game thread optimizations before we would be able to have 120 frames per second mode on console. And people are like, oh, but I see these other, games that can hit 120 frames a second on console. SMITE is a game that has a very challenging game thread because of the number of things that are happening in the world at any given time, right? There's 10 players and dozens of minions and dozens of jungle camps and all of these timers that are going. And like, it's just, there is a lot of stuff that needs to be processed at a given time. And also all the UI stuff and like everything else that's in the game thread. So our goal is to eventually get to 120 frames per second mode on console, but we just have to do more game thread optimizations before we can get to 120 frames per second mode.
Let's see here.
Oh no. Someone's asking, are you able to use a custom code, a byte interpreter for a game? And this is like not the crowd to ask. Byte interpreter is way above any of us.
Yes.
So unfortunately, I don't think we'll have an answer for that.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of people ask about item niches. I saw one person asking about the potential for more mid-intelligence focused items. The question that I just saw is just a general, like, a physical protection attack speed item that doesn't exist. Thoughts on that, Pon?
Yeah, so we've actually been really light on items just for like basically the last 6 months as we really pushed, because gods were our focus. We really want gods out there. We stuck in a few items here and there as we could, and we had the time to. Obviously, with our current schedule of shipping a god every week, gods are still a really big focus for us, and we just continue to try and find niches and gaps where we can sneak items in. I wouldn't expect like here's the item patch where suddenly we have 8 to 9 new items, but just like this patch where we added Gilded Arrow, right? Yeah. Expect us to find items that we think we can implement and implement well, that are going to be nice, not just like clutter, whereas like basically has the same identity. We want to find the highest value ones we can until we have just more bandwidth to really focus on items as a whole. But expect over, especially as this next year, we're gonna pretty, like, if we even do like an item every other patch, which I'm not saying that's going to be our rate, just like even if we did that, by the end of the year we're going to have quite a few new items. We're going to have fleshed out the store quite a bit. And then we also have a ton of systems with the items that we can explore. Like the fact that we actually have a dedicated 7th slot for starters, there's some cool ideas that we've had internally about what we can do with that. So it's going to be difficult just to say, because our current focus again is gods, but we do try and sneak items where we can.
I got 2 I'll take real quick. Battle Pass win. If you missed at Vegas, we announced our new kind of Battle Pass replacement system, which we're calling Wandering Market. And it should just be a better Battle Pass-like experience for everybody who's playing the game.
It's super awesome.
Essentially, as you're playing the game, you will everybody will earn at the same rate a new currency. I don't even remember what we're calling them.
I think that's coins.
Coins. Yeah. And then you spend those coins to unlock things that you want to unlock in an order from a series of pages. Everybody gets access to the first page of every Wandering Market for free. And then if you want to access the later pages, you have to give us money to unlock it, like a Battle Pass, right? Also, these never go away, so you can keep, progressing them until you're done with them. They're going to be available to purchase. I think we were saying indefinitely for right now. So if you come into the game later, there'll be a lot of them for you to choose from. It's just a lot more fan-friendly, not really any FOMO. You also can just earned coins even if you don't have the Battle Pass unlocked. I think there will be a wallet cap, so you can't have like years worth of tokens saved up or whatever. But like so if you're playing the game right now and a Battle Pass comes out later and you don't have as much time to play, you can use your tokens, your coins to get things in that. So it's just a much better system overall, we think. We're really excited about it. The question that started me down this channel was when. I believe it should be about a month from now, very roughly speaking. So we're finalizing the development. It's not in this update, obviously. I don't think it's in the next update. I think it's in the one after. So I think it's in OB4 is my my time frame. And then, there was another question I was going to ask. Is the Conquest map going to change art every season like SMITE 1? I don't know if we've definitely not committed to that right now. I think that generally speaking, the small seasonal updates, the way we did in SMITE 1, were not actually received super well. I think there were pros and cons to the approach. I think the more important thing right now, rather than being like, let's do a small seasonal update to the Conquest map, is we need to go back in and we need to make the Conquest map as a whole much better and bring it up to a new base. Because I think everybody really likes the new Joust map. I think the Joust map sets a really good artistic standard for what we can achieve that's both performant and looks good and feels SMITE 2-y. And the Conquest map was the first map we ever did. There are some parts of it that look really good, and there's some parts of it that don't look good at all. So, and that's no offense to our environment art team. They're great. It's the first thing they did, and we were on a really tight timeline to get it in. So right now we're going back to the Conquest map to take a pass and see how can we make it look amazing. And so the next thing we're going to ship is just going to be let's make an amazing Conquest map, and then we'll go from there, and we'll decide, do we want to do seasonal updates, or what else should be the priority before we get to that, because we still don't have a dedicated assault map. Some people want us to go back and do an all-new arena map. There's a lot of ways that we could go with our environment art resources. But the next thing is definitely going to be a Conquest map art overhaul. So.
All right, well, we are at 1:59, so it's time for one more question.
Sorry, I was reading chat. I know. I missed the bit.
Come on, Alex, you got to back me up here.
I'm sorry.
And then we'll all get back and play some games in open beta too,
If I buy a Wandering Market collection, it will stay forever, right? So I don't have to finish it by a set date. That is the plan. Yes. And just to because I know everybody always thinks that we're just like evil. So because there's no end date, that must mean that it's much harder. And it's going to take, a ton of playing to finish it. And that's why they're screwing us. No, they should be about as much playtime to complete as the SMITE 1 Battle Pass. It's not, we aren't making it harder. If you are a person who plays a lot in a 2-month span, you will most likely complete the Battle Pass and then have enough tokens already saved up to just be able to finish the next one when it comes out, right? Like, it's not, we aren't making it super difficult for people that play a lot because there's such a range of the amount of time that people will play the game in a month. It's like, there's a lot of people that will play 20 hours in a month, and there's a lot of people that will play 200 hours in a month, right? SMITE is just a game that has like such a wide range of players that we want it to be achievable for the vast majority and not be like, I'm never going to get done with this thing.
Cool. I see a good one, and I don't think it's ever been asked before. So we've talked about item builder a lot for SMITE 2. Alex, do you know if we have any plans for custom auto leveling like we have in SMITE 1?
Yeah. So the plan, the vision for this system, the very rough mock-ups that I have photoshopped together myself, do have, yes, there would be, as part of creating a build, you would be able to say what the skill order should be that's associated with that build. And then if you're on auto build, it would either just level you automatically, or if you are not on auto build, then it would say like recommended over the next item that you're supposed to level when you have a point to spend. So that is the intent. Is that going to be part of the very first version of the item builder that comes out, or will that follow, a patch or a month or whatever later? Hard to say right now, but that is something that is intended to be part of the system once it's completed.
Yeah, I'm also looking forward to when we actually get like the full, like, because I think when we first started SMITE 2, one of the bigger things things that we could like improve that would just be overall good experience is having a really good god builder.
Yes.
Yeah. And so like we definitely want it, but like also we had to figure out where active items even staying.
Right.
It's like a big discussion. And like how exactly do we want items to be built? How do we want to display all this stuff? So there was a lot of things to actually lock down before we did all this stuff. And it's also just a big feature on its own. But
For sure.
I especially really want God Builder. That's the feature I'm probably most hyped for.
Yeah, I'm also a big advocate for it. I was even talking this week about ways that we could potentially get some of it sooner, but it's such a big arc of work that I think it's better to take a little bit longer and do it the right way than to shove out some stuff early. So, did you pick a question yet? Do you want to pick a question?
There's one that someone's been asking me, and I'm also want to use it as like a chance to just talk about like kind of how like the design team works.
Yeah.
It's, are you in charge of PonPon? Are you in charge of item design, and how do you settle on what stats are needed? I'm not in charge of items. Generally what ends up happening for like design team is we have like kind of feature owners. We like know we want something for this patch. We know we want something coming up, and so we decide who the feature owner is, and that person is largely the person that like really owns the feature from start to finish, and really works to try and decide that. But along the way, they often consult a lot of the rest of the design team. Like when I have a pitch for a +1 I want to try, I often post it to the design team so I can get feedback on it and stuff like that. So it really is a collaborative effort. And then for like actual finalization, we often throw them in play tests, and we get feedback from how that felt actually in game, because sometimes things are really stronger, a lot weaker than we think.
And feedback not just from the design team,
not from the design team, from everyone. And then once we actually ship that item from there, it largely falls to like balance, which is whoever's kind of owning it at that time. Because again, some people have more bandwidth at times than others, because we're all working on getting new gods out. So sometimes one of us has like a gap where you're like, oh, we can really own balance for this patch. So it really is a team effort. And a lot of that just comes down to who is working on it at any given time. But really the design team is fully involved in the process. So whenever you see like a change, it really is, you can kind of look at the design team and be like, the design team as a whole has made that decision. There might have been a specific owner, but everyone chips in basically at every step along the way.
Awesome. Well, Killgoon Pond, thanks so much for hanging out with me on this Friday, this surprise Open Beta 2 Friday.
Yeah.
If you're just now joining us and haven't heard the news, Open Beta 2 is live now in SMITE 2. So hop on servers, try out Vulcan, try out all the balance changes that we went through.
Aspects for Sobek and Ares.
Aspects for Vulcan as well. We've got a new starter item with Gilded Arrow.
Yep.
Lots of quality of life stuff with colorblind settings, God pinning, mouse wheel zooming. There's lots of stuff. Patch notes are live on smite2.com. If you missed us go over them, you're more than welcome to just head over to the website, read through all the changes, then hop onto the battleground. But until then, hope everyone has an amazing Wednesday. We will be back on Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern for another edition of Titan Talk. But until then, we'll see y'all later. Peace.